Bonnet, Sew What and More Creations. And yes, I have a friend who just contacted me about a specific bonnet design that I make. And it is this design right here, where it has a nice flat headband in the front. And I put a little extra trim on it just because I thought it looked good. This is not the one that she saw. She saw the flip side. So she was under the impression that it was just this design, and I told her, I was like, no, it's two-sided. I do all reversible bonnets, and that's all I do. Although I have made others that are not. Now this particular design is actually a pattern that I found after I had my shoulder surgery. The nurses in the hospitals were wearing these bonnet type hats, and then one of the nurses said, well, if you make bonnets, you need to make these, and she pointed to her head. So I went looking around. I was going to come up with my own design, but I lucked out. Simplicity actually makes one. It's called, it's number 1020, and as you see, it's hospital scrubs, but included is the bonnet, the exact design that I'm making. I just put my own little twist on it. These are not reversible. I am making them for nurses, but they have to be out of cotton. They cannot have the satin ones, I guess, because of bacteria and whatnot. So I have the cotton version, and then I have these that I make that might be satin on both sides, or I'll have cotton on the outside and satin on the inside. So anyway, the pattern pieces are really simple. You only have 3 pieces. You have the basic, the bonnet part, the round part, the top, and I've already hooked these two together. You have the headband piece, which goes in the front, and then you have the rest of the band that goes around the back. There is elastic in this one. Unlike the totally gathered reversible bonnets that I do make, this only requires 9 inches of elastic. And speaking of the elastic, find it, I prefer to use non-roll elastic, and the reason why is it lasts longer in whatever you're making. When you use regular elastic, it's not as full-bodied. Granted, it's softer, but for something like a bonnet to go on your head, you want it to be kind of firm. So I got this 1/2 inch non-roll elastic at the store. You can buy it on eBay. You can find it at Walmart, Joann Fabrics, Hancock Fabrics, if they're still around, and Joann's, Hobby Lobby. So that's what I prefer, because I like for my products to last a long time, and they don't fold up, and you don't end up with, when your regular elastic starts to deteriorate, what happens is it gets so soft that there's no more stretch left, and you want to have as much stretch left in your bonnets and anything else you put elastic in as much as possible. So I'm in crunch time today. I finally was able to find the fabric that I needed for my sports glamours, and this is a Falcon's fabric. This is a cotton blend, and I have the black satin on the other side. The great thing with this pattern is you put both right sides out, so your wrong sides are together. Now some people, when they make their bonnets, they don't pin them, and I'm an avid pinner, and I'll tell you why. When you are mixing materials like I'm doing, satin, even though it doesn't seem to have any stretch, it does have a little bit of stretch. So when you're doing mixed fabrics together on the same project, it's very smart. And as you can see, I pin about every 2 inches, sometimes less, and that way I don't have to worry about, as I'm sewing, that it will bunch up, or all of a sudden I've got this excess piece of material that slid, because satin is slippery. So when you're working with the satin, it's always best to pin. I know I've seen other videos on YouTube where people that are making bonnets, they just put it in the machine and they just start sewing by hand, no pinning, no nothing. And they don't show you the oopses. I've experienced the oopses. I don't like them. So anyway, what I'm going to do is go ahead and sew this. Now one other thing, one other tip. This is a tip of mine. When you're in, I call crunch time, or you just don't have the patience for it, and you don't want to do tailor tacks, and you don't want to do a marking pen to mark the dots to match them up. Notch it. So on the pattern it has single notches. And so what I'll do, where a dot is, I'll make a double notch, like a squared off edge. Let me show you the one that I did here. See, it's square, whereas the other one is pointed. So I know that that square is where my dot was on my pattern, and when I'm going to gather between the dots, I gather between the notch, the double notch ones. So when you are gathering, and on this pattern, it calls for a 3/8 inch seam. 3/8 inch seam for this is perfect, because when you attach the headband part in the original pattern, you put it over top, right sides together, turn it down, and then you do a top stitch. But I do mine reversible, so it's a little bit different. The pattern's really easy to follow, by the way. So when you're gathering, let me find my double notch, because that's my dot. Okay, there it is. And what I'm going to do is, on your sewing machine, at your dot, where your presser foot, see if I can show you this, where your presser foot touches the fabric. Let's see if you can see this. I don't know if you can see that, but right here is the edge of the presser foot, and there's the edge of my fabric. So that's going to be my first stitching line. Now to do that, you put your sewing machine on the largest stitch possible, your gather stitch, and on mine it's a 5. So you put it all the way on the 5, and I'm going to go ahead and do this first line of gather. This is for the front of the bonnet. This bonnet only is gathered in the front, as far as stitch gathered. In the back, that's where the elastic goes. And you want to do 2 rows of the gather stitching. 2 rows. Reason is, what happens is, when you pull both those rows of stitching up, it makes it nice and neat and flat but gather, instead of being all puckered. So, okay, there it is. Around. And you want to stop just before where the dot is. Just before it. And bring your needle all the way up. Give yourself about 4 inches of excess thread at the end to avoid your stitches when you start to gather it by hand, by pulling on these. You want to tie a knot in the end of it, and that way they don't pull out. I've done this before when I was younger, started gathering, forgot to tie the ends off, and the whole thing went out and I had to do it over again, and that's no fun. So I'm going back to the ends and tying them off by hand. And then I'm going to do the second row. Now the second row, same thing, just put where, now in this case, the second row is, you put your needle down in, and you want to have a good leader of, 4 inches of thread from where you cut it off from the first row. And now the stitch line that you just did is at the edge of your presser foot. So you put your stitching from what that you just did at the edge of your presser foot, and you just follow it. That's your guideline, and you just follow it around again to where you stop from the first row. Yeah. And you can come in a little closer to it if you like. But the great thing about the gathered stitches is when you're done and you finished your product, and if you see those gathered stitches on the outside, you can just pull them out, and that's the whole beauty of it. So almost there. again, needle all the way up, pull it out, give myself a good 4 or 5 inches of excess thread on the end so I can tie it off. Come on, get out of there. I think I picked up the wrong scissors. There we go. Tie that off. Now this is black thread, so it's hard to see, but this is one of my items for this festival that I've got going. Now, I've done my gather stitches. Now this is another thing. I still have the back end that hasn't been stitched. So what you want to do is go back to your regular stitch width, and mine it's between a 2 and a 3. Most sewing machines is between a 3 and a 4. And then what I'm going to do is that notch that's my dot, I'm going to go and do a regular stitch 3/8 inch all the way around the other side to finish that off. Always back stitch a few stitches because that keeps it the right tension. And just go around. Now this particular pattern, the diameter of the hat part or the circle part at the top is about 20 inches. And that makes, I call it a regular kind of average size. If you wanted to make this design larger, all that you would need to do is when you have the circle pattern on your fabric, you want it a little bit larger, cut out about 1 inch from the edge of your pattern, but still put your notches where you want them, and that way you can have a larger design to hold either, you know, thicker braids or more hair, whatever you need to do for it. So I've done all my pre-stitching on this. I'm going to pull these pins out, and then I'll take you to the next step.